Hey guys, welcome to week 5 of class. This week we are going to dive into a period that some historians refer to as the early republic. Essentially what we're going to be doing this week is sort of assessing the way in which this new government began to unfold. And we're going to be doing this by assessing the presidencies of the first two presidents, the first of course being George Washington, and the second being John Adams. We are going to spend most of our time this week looking at George Washington because he is what we call a precedent president. Much of what he did in his first 2 terms, and he will only serve 2 terms, although at that time it was not unlawful for a president to serve indefinitely, but Washington chooses only to serve 2 terms. But much of what happens during his administration sets a precedent, including the 2-term limit. Okay? There's going to be a host of things that we're going to be looking at, whether it be foreign policy, and we have a foreign policy at this time, and that policy, as Washington will espouse it, will be a policy of neutrality and impartiality, and we're going to see this in his farewell address. We're going to see this through the Neutrality Proclamation as the French go to war with themselves and others, and they seek to have the United States drawn into that. Washington refuses, to get entangled in that event. So there's going to be some foreign issues that we're going to look at, but there's also some domestic issues, and we're going to be looking this week at the way in which the Constitution was understood as either a living, breathing document, one that could change, one that had implied powers, which Hamilton's going to argue, or a sort of dead document, not that it in fact doesn't affect us, but that it can't be changed, that we can only go off of what the letter actually says. And this is something Jefferson was talking about. And this idea of strict construction or loose construction is still with us today, but it's important to look at this in the early development of our republic because it sets the stage for some of our economic development, and it helps us to understand why we have the economy we do today. So when I ask you this week to assess the debate between Hamilton and Jefferson, be thinking about how those ideas are still with us today. And in fact, that question is one of the questions that you'll have to look at this week in your discussion board. And I want to make clear that you need to be sure to look at when those discussion boards are due. Okay, so please be sure to take a look at the due dates on those. And of course, all discussions are due by 11:59 p.m. on the respected day that they're due. So just be looking for that, okay? So we're going to be taking a look at quite a bit this week. In addition to that, we'll have a look at John Adams' presidency, albeit only briefly. We're not going to take a look too long at what he had to do. But this week there's a lecture, there's 2 films. One is actually going to be a bit longer, about 45 minutes or so, talking about what we call the real George Washington. We obviously want to be very total in our approach when we take a look at historical figures, and I think that this film does a good job in that. Okay, and then I think you have to read chapter 8 this week as well. So that kind of covers what we're going to be doing this week. The one thing I do want to just make you aware of, just to keep in the back of your mind as we get closer to the midterm, is that there is an exam coming up. Your midterm exam, and I will give more information about this a little bit later, but your midterm exam will be 80 multiple choice questions, and I believe it's worth 2.5 points each. And I generally grade on a curve, so just be aware that that will be there for you, okay? But just be keeping that in the back of your mind, as well as with your paper that you're working towards completing these things. So I think that covers everything I have for you, and so if you have any questions or concerns, always please feel free to contact me, and I'll do the best I can to get back to you. Otherwise, as always, go in peace, be warm and filled, and may the force be with you. Be blessed, guys.